Before I begin, let me make one thing clear. There are things in this world that defy explanation, things that don't fit within the logical framework we've built to understand our lives. Most of the time, we dismiss stories about the supernatural, chalking them up to overactive imaginations or outright lies. But what happens when one of those stories comes true? When the unbelievable becomes your reality? That's exactly what happened to me a month ago. It all started with a phone call. My mom had suffered a massive stroke. She lived alone in a small, rural town 2 hours away, and her neighbor, Mrs. Harper, was the one who found her. I dropped everything, kissed my wife and 2 kids goodbye, and jumped in my car, breaking every speed limit along the way. I arrived just as the ambulance was pulling out of her driveway. Mrs. Harper was standing in the doorway, visibly shaken. She told me how she found my mom lying on the kitchen floor, her face distorted and speech slurred. The doctors stabilized her that night, but they made it clear her recovery would be slow and difficult. I decided to stay in her house for the time being, to help with her care and be close by in case of emergencies. My wife understood, though I could hear the concern in her voice when we talked. At first, everything seemed normal. Mom came home from the hospital weak but alert. She wasn't the same though. She'd always been this vibrant, chatty woman who loved to cook and keep up with the neighborhood gossip. Now she was quiet, too quiet. She'd spend hours just staring out the living room window, her expression blank. I chalked it up to the aftereffects of the stroke. The doctors had warned me that emotional changes were common, so I didn't press her. But then things started getting weird. One night, I woke up to the sound of faint whispering. At first, I thought it was coming from the TV in the living room, but when I checked, the room was dark. The whispering was coming from Mom's bedroom. I pushed the door open gently and saw her sitting up in bed facing the window. She was talking to someone or something. "Mom, who are you talking to?" She didn't turn around. Her voice was low and strained, almost like she was trying to force the words out. "It's outside," she said. I walked over to the window and looked out. The backyard was empty, just the faint outline of trees swaying in the breeze. "There's nothing there, Mom," I said, pulling the curtains shut. "You're probably just tired. Let's get you back to sleep." She didn't argue, but as I helped her lie down, she grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide and terrified. "It's coming," she whispered. The next day she seemed better, more alert, even. But when I asked her about the night before, she just shook her head and muttered something about shadows in the trees. I didn't know what to make of it. I figured maybe it was a side effect of her medication or some kind of delirium from the stroke. But then, that night, I heard the noises. It started as a faint scratching sound, like branches brushing against the house. But the rhythm was wrong. It wasn't random like wind. It was deliberate. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside to check. The backyard was empty, but the air felt heavy, almost oppressive. The trees at the edge of the yard seemed to loom closer than they should have, their dark shapes twisting unnaturally in the moonlight. I shook it off and went back inside, locking the door behind me. The following night, I woke up to the sound of breaking glass. I ran to Mom's room and found her window shattered. She was sitting on the bed, staring at the empty frame. Her lips were moving, but no sound came out. I rushed to her side and shook her gently. "Mom, are you okay? What happened?" She turned to me, her eyes hollow and sunken. "It's here," she said. Before I could respond, I heard it, a low groaning creak, like wood bending under pressure. I turned toward the window, and that's when I saw it. There, just beyond the broken glass, was a figure. It looked like a tree at first, a gnarled, twisted mass of bark and branches. But then it moved, its limbs extended, unnaturally long and thin, scraping against the walls as it crept closer. Two hollow, black pits where its eyes should have been stared back at me. I froze, paralyzed by fear. The thing reached through the window, its branch like arms wrapping around my mom. She didn't scream. She didn't even move. She just sat there as if she'd been expecting this. I tried to pull her away, but the creature was too strong. Its limbs tightened around her, and then, with a sound like wood splintering, it dragged her out the window and into the darkness. When I came to my senses, it was morning. The police were there, asking questions I couldn't answer. There was no sign of my mom, just bloodstains on the floor and the shattered remnants of the window. The officers said they'd investigate, but I could tell they didn't believe me. Who would? I've since learned that my mom's disappearance wasn't the first. Over the past year, several people in the area have gone missing under strange circumstances. Their bodies were never found. The locals have a name for it, the Hollow One. They say it's been here for decades, maybe longer, and that it only comes for those who've seen it. I don't know if I believe in curses or legends, but I do know one thing. I'm not staying in that house another night. If you're watching this and you live near the woods, be careful. Don't ignore the whispers. Don't dismiss the shadows. And whatever you do, don't look out the window at night.